Today, you will be talking about parallelogram. Parallelogram. Now, notice something. With parallelogram, we have little two lines right here. Boom, boom, right? You see these two lines? Those two lines have a reason. There's a reason why they're there. Those two lines represent parallel. So, let's dive in straight to the definition of parallelogram. Because there is a little two L's, which stands for parallel, that only means that in a parallelogram, both pair of opposite sides are parallel. Check this out. So this line right here is parallel to this line right here. Opposite sides are parallel. Same thing. This line, it is parallel to this opposite side. Check, that covers definition 1. Definition 2. Beyond them being opposite side being parallel, we can also say the opposite sides are congruent. This will have to be congruent to this. Again, this line will also have to be congruent to the opposite side, right? What is congruent? Well, congruent is another word for equal. So, for example, if this was, let's say 5, then this also would have to be 5. Let's say that this was 6, therefore that's also 6. Check. Move on to 3. With 3 says opposite side, of both sides of opposite angles are congruent. What does that mean? If I drew an angle right here, then what's a direct opposite angle to that? It'll be this one right here. Well, those are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent, right? Same thing over here. That angle opposite is congruent to the opposite angle. What does that mean? For example, if this was 130, this is also be 130. If this was 50, that would also be 50. All right? Check. I don't want you to memorize this stuff. This is your note. Let's move on to, I'm going to jump to the right side. I'm going to look at the consecutive angles are supplementary. What does that even mean? Let's unpack these vocabularies. Consecutive. What does that mean? Consecutive only means right next to it, right? Right next to whatever it is, right? So that means this. Remember when I said, let's say that this angle is 130. All right. And I'm trying to figure out the measurement of its consecutive angle. Its consecutive angle will have to be either this or right there, directly next to it. But we say that there are supplementary. Supplementary means adds up to 180. If you forget what supplementary means, if you look, the S stands for 8 and the U stands for O, then we have 180. All right. It just means you add up to 180. So this angle plus this angle has to equal to 180. Then you can easily conclude and say this has to be 50, right? If that's 50, opposite angle, same thing. This and this got to add up to 180. So that's also 50. Well, what about this one? Well, we know this has to be 180 because we talk about opposite angle. However, this plus this got to add up to 180. So you see how that works? It's just a perfect relationship that they got going on there. Check. All right, let's talk about diagonals. I'm back to 4. All right, so with this one on 4, it says the following. All right, let me just, okay, so diagonals bisect each other. The word bisect means cut. You're cutting it perfectly in half. Cut in half. Perfectly in half. So you have 2 diagonals here. Diagonal 1 goes boom, and then diagonal 2, let me use a different color for that. Here it is. And they cut each other perfectly in half, meaning that this right here must be congruent to this. The left side will equal to the right side because they are bisecting one another. All right, same thing. this side, the left side of the yellow line, will equal to the right side of the yellow line. If you want to put it more in perspective, let's put some numbers here. If this was single, this would also be single. Okay, if this was if the whole line was 8, then let's say this will be 4, then this will be 4. All right. So this is what, it's just another definition. Check. All right. So let's put it more in perspective. Let's look at 5 real fast. 5 says one pair. Okay, one pair. This is the same pair of opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Well, that kind of is very repetitive because we already covered that. So it just says that this, I can just pick a pair, this line and this line. Well, we know that they are parallel and they are congruent. We know that, it's kind of more of just being repetitive. Okay. All right. So, I mean, you can, if you want to add more, you can say, well, Mr. Kabongo, or, can we not just say, here's this line and this line? Can we not say that boom, 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 those shows the parallel? Can we also say they're congruent? Yeah, duh, we already covered that part. Let's move to the right side. Let's look at alternate interior angles are congruent. What does that even mean? All right, let's go back to the example I gave you earlier. We know opposite angles are congruent. Opposite angle are congruent. So for example, let's say that this is, again, 130, right? I'm just going to say, I don't know. I don't even want to write the number yet. So opposite angles are congruent. But let's go further more in detail. This angle, this little bit of angle that I'm coloring right here, that angle will be congruent to this angle. And notice they're alternating. That's what we call an alternating interior angles. They are congruent. So for example, if this was 60, guess what? The left side would also be 60. All right. And for this one, if this was 80, guess what would this be? 80. That's pretty much how alternating interior works, right? Let's give you another example over here. This angle right here has to be congruent to its opposite angle right here. And then if you want to make it a little bit more colorful, you go over here, you say it, all right. So let's say that this right here, that's the right side. Then you go over here, you say the left side. They're alternating. They have to be congruent. You with me? They gotta be congruent. And this left side, then you go on the other side, you say it has to be congruent to this side. That's pretty much what that means. All right, so let's look at number 4, the last one here. It says one diagonal creates 2 congruent triangles. All right, how many triangles do you see on number 4 right now? Look at number 4, look at number 4, look at number 4. How many triangles do you see? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I see my first triangle right here. Triangle uno. And then where's my triangle dos? Here's my triangle dos. So the diagonal really makes those two triangles congruent, because if you go back to what we discussed, your previous knowledge, we were able to show that 2 triangles are congruent based on either side angle side or angle side angle, or angle side, or HL. I think I'm probably forgetting one, side. Remember all of this? So pretty much just know when you're working with the parallelogram, you can have 2 congruent triangles with that one diagonal cutting them perfectly in half. That's it. All right. So you ready to do the practice? You got this.